Firstly, welcome you, Vicky. It's lovely to see you. I wish we were kind of closer, that we could kind of connect and hug and, see each other's, you know, sense of self, to be around each other, all of us. But online makes a lot of things possible. It brings people together nevertheless. And Vicky, how are you this evening?
No,
Or
I'm
this
good.
morning? It's morning this morning.
Yeah, I'm really, really humbled to be here.
Oh, that's lovely. Anything else besides humbled? Have you got a cup of tea there?
Always
Always. What kind of tea do you drink?
decaffeinated because you don't want to see me on caffeine. It's not pretty.
And did you make the tea?
No, my lover made my tea.
Okay, that just, these are important things. And do you have it with milk or lemon?
Always milk. No, no
Just
sugar. Just like George Orwell wrote an article, The Perfect Cup of Tea. I do just what George Orwell told me to do.
And you weren't doing that anyway. George Orwell didn't just validate that in some way,
Yeah.
authorize it. It
No, joking.
it's great to have you here, and thank you for putting your trust in Everything is Connected Press with your valuable work. I love the ethos of how you have got actually all the papers online, or most of them, not all of them actually, but because I looked for one the other day and realized it wasn't there. But this is a kind of, not everybody wants to go searching for a PDF or something that's kind of not quite, tactile, that's not all together. And oh, I've just realized the writing's back to front behind me. I wonder if I can do anything
No,
about
it's good. It's perfect from, no, it's right from us looking at you.
it. Is it? Okay,
Yes, it is.
good.
Yeah, just so you know.
Shall we just first of all say thank you to Gail Mountain?
Yeah.
Go on, say a bit about Gail and
Oh, Gail Mountain, my dear one, who's an artist friend of mine, painted the cover for the book, inspired by my tattoos and my relationship to water. And everybody is so reflected to me that it's captured the spirit of both me and the work. And so I'm just so, yeah, just so grateful. And also, Gail Simon, you did such a good job making it fit the book because I had nothing to do with this. So that's great.
interesting how things come together sometimes.
Yeah.
That you asked a friend who hadn't seen like a table of contents, but knew maybe does Gail know your work?
Not much.
So
No.
isn't that wonderful? Because when I saw
Yeah.
this, and I just thought about waves, obviously, sea and waves, things coming in, things going out. It just felt like the most beautiful image to
Yeah.
to have. Yeah. And then I realized today when I was looking around for a link, I found another of your books and it's got a similar kind of color palette, and I hadn't seen that before.
Oh,
So is this a you thing? Is this, you're
yeah,
not
kind of a me thing. I also think it's so my other book, which is called, ooh, boy, Justice Doing at the Intersections of Power, that came out of Dulwich. It
that's it.
also, a friend of mine also painted waves for that one. But actually, Janella Bird in Aotearoa, New Zealand, all of her books for me have some kind of motif of water on them. And I think it's also a nod to Janella.
You dedicated the book to Janella.
Yeah.
Let's say a little bit about that.
Well, I think Janella Bird's work at the beginning of me being an activist and being like invited into the narrative world, I was extremely skeptical. Janella Bird, her moral courage, seriously, her relational language practices and her ways of being let me know there was going to be a space for me in therapy. And she has been continually willing to offer me critique, help me move through accountability practices. She's done a lot of hard things with me.
What do you
You know,
mean move through accountability practices?
when I've had struggles and I've transgressed, she's someone I've reflected with to try to help make repair and to see where my analysis and my practices fallen like from my intentions. So I think she's given me some brilliant supervision, but also her teachings and her writings. There's so many threads of Janella Bird's work through my writing and my practice that when you're so immersed in other people's work, you can't actually tease out what's from them and what's you. It's so collaborative. I'm not saying that Janella Bird collaborated with me, but I am collaborating with her body of work all the time. And I think Alan Wade and I feel that about each other's work also, more in a more mutually, laterally mentoring each other kind of way.
Mm. Ethics,
Alan Wade, who just got the Order of Canada for his work.
that's beautiful on all
Yeah,
of your behalves, isn't
yeah,
it? It's
yeah,
it's a nod towards, I don't know how to describe what the language would be, but
yeah,
systemic, collaborative, ethics-led,
yeah,
community, challenging, lots of
yeah.
things. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
In a way, I suppose this book launch is a kind of not an award, but an honoring, isn't it?
Oh,
We can't offer you the Order of anything. Funny things awards, aren't they? But Vicky, you've done a very interesting, and it's worth mentioning this, in-depth talk with Sheila Rashid as part, who's actually speaking later on in the Systemic Lives meetings
yeah.
series that Everything is Connected Press and Murmurations Journal host. And you've spoken a lot about your life there, but maybe for people here, how did you find your way into activism, and how did you find your way from activism into writing about practice?
Hmm.
It's a
Well,
big, isn't it?
I think just living at the intersections of struggle activism, as Bell Hooks says, was just a response to pain. It was a way of seeking collaboration and safety and feeling seen. And actually, I'd say I always think of political, like direct action activism, as kind of sanity making projects for me, where I look around and like everybody here, I am not wild for for believing in a just society and working against oppression. So I think it started early on for me around issues around misogyny, choice, feminism. I didn't even have the language of feminism at that time, but I knew what I needed and wanted. And I was just got involved in movement politics. And so I was really immersed as in kind of union work and student unions and poverty, anti-poverty stuff, gender-based violence kind of stuff, kind of roughly. And then I went to Botswana, Africa to teach. And Nelson Mandela was in prison in Robben Island in South Africa, and South Africa was under a state of emergency. So there was a state of apartheid in South Africa. And I became involved in that struggle, which then Angela Davis was talking about open prisons in South Africa and in Israel. You know, that Palestine was an open prison. I mean, I got involved with anti apartheid work there, which led me to look at anti apartheid resistance in Canada from Indigenous people on Turtle Island, all these movements together. And then I got involved in death penalty work because they started to kill people again in California. And I was like, I going to throw myself into that. So I've always just followed the intersections of struggle that have moved into my life. And then how that and I think the Just Therapy people from Aotearoa, New Zealand, I went and did some trainings with them because I was so concerned about white supremacy and colonization. So I met, Janella Bird in Aotearoa, Charles Waldegrave, Kiwi Tamasisi, Flora Tahaka, who was a Maori head of the family center. And these folks all made space for me, I think alongside Cheryl White as well, and David Dembro, who also came to Aotearoa while I was there, to think about that there was a place for direct action social justice movements in the stuff that gets called therapy or community work. And that really led me in that direction, you know?
Before you get on to the second part then of my question, I
Yeah,
want to bring you back to that two phrases used, the intersections of power and a response to pain.
yeah,
And I was thinking, this is such a moment. The
yeah,
world is falling
yeah,
apart. It's
yeah,
very dangerous, and there's more danger on the way to some
yeah,
peoples more than other peoples, but a lot
yeah,
of peoples.
yeah,
And I was thinking about a response to pain. How do we, because activism is about activating something, isn't it? As
yeah,
opposed to paralysis. But,
yeah,
one could be a paralyst or an
yeah,
activist.
yeah,
I'm just sort of thinking, I wonder how what the relationship is between that, a response to pain, and finding the intersections of power as a place to, not sure what the verb is there.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, I like truly, I just speak to death penalty work. I could not commit my life to trying to stop the execution of 20 men I worked for on death row in the United States. They are the people who taught me everybody is so much more than the worst thing they've ever done. But honest to God, Gail, I could not sleep at night thinking I was having blood on my hands if I did not do something about that. It helped me stay sane in it. I think I actually believe that actions and movements and collective actions for social justice are sanity making projects. I think acts for justice, you know, are acts of mental wellness as opposed to, I think, the collective mental illness we're looking at, right? That kind of collective struggle we're at. So yeah, for me, and who meet you at those intersections? This is again another beautiful teaching from Angela Davis, Black Panther Angela Davis, who says it's not about our intersections of identity, it's about the intersections of our struggle. So who can I be in solidarity with? And one thing I believe and say all the time is there's always more solidarity than you know. Look for these connections. That's my hope, my faith, my spirituality is solidarity, truly. I mean that. I know there are more people in solidarity with me than I can see, than is evident, because resistance of people who are oppressed, it's so hard for that to be overt. But if we look under, if we're looking from a rhizomatic way, if we look just underneath the ground, just underneath the dirt of everyday life, we can see it revealed that there's so much more connective action, solidarity than we might see.
People are responding to this. I'm responding to this.
Yeah,
I'm feeling like, like everybody else here, this is not solid ground. This is not an easy time, and I'm searching for ways of how to be, and nothing feels enough. And so I
yeah,
love the punctuation of solidarity being your spirituality. Is that what you said?
yeah.
A sort of it's beautiful because it's sort of, yeah, people will make their own meaning of that. Tell me, jumping on, not out of disrespect, because we could talk just about any of these points for the
Yeah,
next however long we might ever have.
yeah, yeah.
What, how did you get into writing?
I've always been a writer, I would say. When I was in Botswana, I wrote letters home because there was no internet then. I wrote letters home that were 20 pages.
What have you done with those letters, Vicky?
I also studied poetry at university. Like I did outdoor recreation because I was a failed athlete. Like I had no competitive spirit. So I did basically canoeing and ended up working with hoods in the woods. But I also was desperate, as Bell Hooks says. I was looking into theory for a way to address the pain. And so I got involved. I did a BA in literature, mostly in poetry. And poetry is about an economy of language. And that's what therapy is about. You don't, although I talk a lot when I teach and stuff, but when you're doing therapy or a sacred conversation, you don't say much and you want to make sure every word is doing its job, you know? So that's actually the writing is easy for me. The writing is the easy part, and I feel accompanied by textual allies all the time. So like most of when I've been in extreme isolation, it's been textual allies who've held me up. You know,
It's a good phrase, that, isn't it? People, textual allies.
I
As a
got that. I got that from my PhD advisor from social constructionism. That I'm just gapping on his name. Like,
John,
no, no, John Schotter was on my committee, but
I see.
Ken Gergen. He even wrote an acknowledgement for this. Ken
No,
Gergen.
this was borrowed, I think, from Mary Gergen.
Okay, I love Mary.
So Ken might have been using it, but
Well,
Mary,
one of the things Ken said to me was, Vicky, you are somebody who walks around with a lot of textual allies because I always reference widely. Part of it is an accountability thing, a decentering practice, but also it's to get me solidarity. I am not alone thinking this.
it is solidarity, and it is important I love the idea
Yeah,
of the word allies with
yeah,
textual, because otherwise ideas can easily become disembodied and just something out
yeah,
there. And but somebody wrote them, and they wrote them in a particular time and place and context, and with
Yeah.
feeling, out of
Yeah.
kinds of feelings. So that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, Poetry, you could have, when you dropped out of games because you weren't competitive, you could have sat there eating, packets of crisps and Coca-Cola. So, why, how come you didn't, you did poetry? What happened there?
Well, I think words really move me, right? I don't know which one of these geniuses we were just mentioning who said, oh, Lynn Hoffman said words actually do things. Words can actually touch people, you know? American family therapist Lynn Hoffman. And I believe that because I know words don't do violence, but I have been in political struggles, right? Where words create the conditions for violence, like hate speech, right? And but there is a response of that. There's also the words of solidarity and revolutionary love that connect us and our acts of resistance against that. So
That's
like words have
really,
always mattered.
that's a really important point for us right now,
Yeah.
because the sound, the noise coming from,
Yeah.
the headlines and the certain
Yeah.
amplification of some people's voices through the media, through the organization
Yeah.
of social media is so overwhelming. But our voices matter in the
Yeah.
street, in our localities, in whatever ways. Um, what do you think is the relationship between your words in talk and words in writing?
Geez, I hope they sing to each other.
But you hope they sing, did you say?
Like I hope they're in some kind of,
Oh, sing.
they could hang together without being too cacophonous. Like I hope they're in an ethical alignment. Like, yeah.
I'm sure they're in ethical alignment. I feel like I'm hearing and talking with and reading the same person.
Mm.
But I was suddenly interested in the words as the common denominator, the movement, the passion, the ethics, and thinking, I'm wondering, really, it's a question to me, as somebody who's read your work a lot and heard you speak and been in conversation with you. I was wondering what the differences are, but that might not, that's maybe just a question to park. But I feel like I really hear you when I read you.
Oh,
And of course, I contacted you this week, didn't I? And it was a sad moment.
yeah. Yeah.
I just want to kind of recognize the importance
Yes.
of some of your written words because you're not, we're not always around to be able to have that live conversation with
Oh,
others. And I wrote to you just to say, and there are others here who will connect with this from the LGBTQI systemic therapist group, that we lost somebody this week. I'm reluctant to use the word suicide because
yeah.
I don't know what that word really means in
Hmm.
contexts. That is
Hmm.
not always clear. But your paper, Hope Kills, what's
Hate kills.
fate? Sorry,
Hate kills a
stupid.
social justice response to what gets called suicide.
Hate kills. It's hate that kills, and a social justice response to suicide. And I sent the paper around to our group so that we could discuss it together, because I think, we were excluded from the funeral,
Yeah.
perhaps because there was the word queer in the title rather of our systemic group. It was an online element, the funeral, and it you can easily feel hopeless and powerless in a situation like that. But I wanted to extend my gratitude to you on behalf
Mm.
of the group to say, and others to say, thank you for putting that out there. Because
Yeah.
if you don't write it, then we can't find it. And sometimes one needs
Yeah.
to be able to go
Yeah.
through things. I didn't think of it immediately. I thought of it was while I was walking around feeling
Yeah.
very cross and miserable.
Mm.
And it was somebody who defined as trans and non-binary.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was very important
Mhm.
that several pieces of your work came
Yeah.
together as a trans ally. And in terms of putting a kind of challenging the medicalized mental health um, frame on
Yeah.
suicide. I've been doing
Yeah.
a lot of family research, as you know, and one of the things I found out about my Jewish pre-post Holocaust family is that some that when people killed themselves,
Yeah,
um, Jewish people killed themselves, and probably other people as well, at a critical moment. They didn't call it suicide in the records, and I don't mean the Nazis didn't call it that.
no, yeah,
In a post-Holocaust context, they called it Freitod, free death,
yeah,
and some other words as well, that people were making other kinds of
yeah,
choices. So
yeah,
I'm just connecting with some of that too, because
yeah,
a lot of people are employed in medically religious institutions, ideologically medical
yeah,
institutions, and
yeah,
it's very hard to stay sane and bring
yeah,
its own cultural sanity and alternative ways of thinking. Though this is what you do. You go into workplaces and you work with people to help them hear themselves and find their experience, their sanity, their
yeah.
knowledge at the many intersections which aren't always acknowledged by mainstream cultural discourses and policies. And then you write about that.
Well, that whole article, well, thanks. So here, what I think you're talking about, Gail, is us being in a spirited solidarity, because I think of solidarity as a spirited, sacred practice, actually. And so I was able to be a textual ally to you, to people you sent it out to. They don't know me, but this words can hold them. And that article on hate kills, Jennifer White, who's a professor at the University of Victoria, and all her work is around suicidology. She knows, like, she's got a lot of expertise on this. She heard me say that in a talk about something else and teased it out. And I think I was talking actually about what you're talking about, Gail, in a different context. Men on death row who decide to, quote, volunteer for death. That's seen as a suicide by the government, but it's actually prisoner assisted homicide. It is not a state assisted suicide because they don't have the autonomy to choose to have a life. So I was talking about the death penalty, and Jennifer White picked that sentence out, and then she asked me to keynote the National Suicide Conference. And I said, they are not going to want to hear me because I'm going to say you don't look inside the brain of the oppressed to understand oppression. It's in the social world. And so sorry for the loss of your trans non-binary person in your beloved community. And I'm thinking about you being in the UK and the Supreme Court of the UK deciding recently there are only men and women. And Judith Butler, queer theorist Judith Butler, responding that as soon as you've decided whole groups of people can be disappeared, now we have a fascistic logic. We are acting in a fascistic logic. And so that's the context that led to this person not being belonged, right? Yeah.
Thank
Thanks so
you
much
for saying
for
that.
bringing that up.
Thank you for joining
Yeah.
and in saying that in particular.
Yeah.
You and I could talk
Yeah.
quite a while. And we have to, I'm trying to kind of mentally zip my mouth up a little bit so that and sort of curtail myself so that we can keep things rolling.
Yeah.
Thank you. I enjoyed that talk. I'm sure
Me
everyone
too.
else did. Go on, practice your emojis, people, the react. I want to see if it works. Okay. Oh yeah.
Oh,
There's
thanks,
things going
Kathleen.
on. There's things
Thanks,
going
Liz.
on.
Okay.
Okay. So look, Vicky, do you want to take a breath?
No, I'm good.
And then and a short breath, a long breath, and then
Yeah.
something and introduce what it is you're reading.
Well, okay. Well, thanks so much. Look, how I want to start is acknowledging I'm on the territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh people here in what is understood as Vancouver, in what's understood as Canada. And I just want to start with so much gratitude to Gail and Leah, not just for the mountains of work they did on the book, so much more work than I did, and to Gail Mountain for the cover, but also Gail and Gail Simon and Leah Slater like envisioned this book. And that's world building, like Miriam Kaba talks about from Abolition. Like someone envisions a future that you're in that you can't even imagine. That's like why we all do this. This is so much a social project and a collaboration. So I want to start there. So I'm just going to read a bit from the introduction of the book, and I'm going to read some of the pieces that are about my response to the stuff that gets called trauma and resistance. So that's where I'm going to start. As an activist settler, it's essentially ethically imperative for me to acknowledge where I stand. The context of the work that I'm involved in, dedicated to, and in solidarity with occurs on occupied, stolen, and unceded territory and ancestral lands of Indigenous peoples. As a white settler to these territories, I work to stay implicated in the ongoing catastrophes of white supremacy, colonization, and genocide. Here I'm ever mindful of the teachings of Riel Dupley Rossi, who informs me genocide by the Canadian state is ongoing in current necropolitics and policies, but also only attempted as resistance from Indigenous people is as long as colonization on Turtle Island. As a white settler, I'm also required to act in solidarity with the Palestinian people in resistance to settler colonialism and genocide. It's essential I take this position at a time when many people at the intersections of oppression and subjugation are being punished, silenced, and erased for their resistance to ongoing genocide in Palestine. In similar ways, Indigenous people, especially land defenders and the Eunice Stolten camp here, and people acting in solidarity with them have experienced and are experiencing tactics of erasure, criminalization, and punishment for naming and resisting the ongoing colonial violence of Canada's nation building, especially residential schools, as political violence and torture. So I'm going to read a bit now from Trauma and Resistance Hang Time. Trauma, as conceptualized and defined by the mainstream field of psychology, is a medicalized term that obscures violence and human suffering. The language of psychology centers on descriptions of individuals' brokenness, which hides the structural violence that promotes suffering. Legislative poverty, ableism, developer-created homelessness, ongoing colonial violence, racism, anti-Black racism, white supremacy, the prison industrial complex, cis-normativity, heteronormativity, and rape culture. Specifically, the structural state violence that fosters the murder and disappearance of Indigenous women that is tied to the rape of the earth through resource extraction and enacting ongoing colonialism. All of these forms of structural violence are excluded from and concealed by psychological conceptualizations of trauma. A complex analysis helps us resist the psychological project, which reduces political and structural violence into personal deficiency, the perfect storm of victim blaming. Psychology has long been curious about parenting as the site of harm, focused on abusive or neglected families, and actively constructs those families as the source of mental unwellness. People with childhoods characterized by abuse and neglect are constructed as lacking parents who are as benevolent as competent as those who don't experience these harms. But what they lack is justice. Poverty, which is legislated and predictable in capitalist neoliberal societies, causes harm to families by manufacturing precarious lives and limiting life choices such as employment, housing, and education. This is neglect. Colonization, ableism, transphobia, racism, femicide, misogyny, and anti-Black racism are abuse. This is not a matter of individual personal resiliency, but of structural oppression. Conceptualizations of personal dysfunction and trauma not only obscure more than they reveal, but actively contribute to blaming individuals and families for their own suffering. So I want to talk about my witnessing approach to this work, a witnessing stance. I describe my stance as witnessing, with an aim to build bridges of activism and therapy. There's a rich theory of theoretical practices oriented around witnessing, specifically in the narrative and constructive traditions. My approach is informed by decades of fellowship in social movements and activist practices of witnessing, which hold governments and other bodies to account for abuses of power. These abuses include executions, torture, and other violent struggles that silence dissent and terrorize populations into submission. The presence of an international activist community is a profound act of faith in the power of witnessing. Witnessing also serves to resist the individualization and isolation of persons who have survived violence. El Salvadoran liberation psychologist and Jesuit priest Martin Barreau worked to bring liberation theology to psychology, teaching that in order for psychology to be liberating, it must first be liberated. In 1989, a Salvadoran death squad, which was American trained, executed him, alongside his Jesuit brothers, his housemaker, and her daughter. Martin Barreau teaches that political violence is best understood from a perspective that is both psychological and sociopolitical. This means that the path to liberation lies not in the individual psyche of the victim, but within social relationships. The meanings given to acts of political and state terror are social, not individual. State oppression, such as residential schools, legislated poverty, developer designed homelessness, dismembers, disconnects, and removes people from their sites of belonging. In resistance to this dislocation, witnessing work is situated within network communities. Witnessing engages in ethic of belonging that reconnects, paying particular attention to cultural meanings and practices that belong persons in community. I believe, along with many others across time, that culture is a site of healing and that justice doing can promote healing. A commitment to witnessing in activist cultures includes the duty of the witness to move beyond hearing individual pain into collective accountability, to take actions against injustices. Witnessing exists in relationships of solidarity, meaning shared ethics across points of connection. And it requires an overt position for justice doing, which requires the witness to respond by taking actions to change the conditions that support and promote abuses of power in action. So, acts of resistance. As an activist, it has never felt useful, accountable, or respectful to question persons who have experienced torture about their humiliation and harm. It has always been useful to talk to how they managed to survive, to stay human in situations outside of human understanding, situations that are perpetrated by governments, government agents acting with impunity to suppress dissent and political terrorism. These teachings led me to seek stories of resistance to suffering instead of psychologizing and medicalizing their experiences of torture and interpreting their acts of resistance as criteria for mental illness and trauma. My understandings of resistance owe much to asylum seekers and refugees who've survived torture and political violence, whom I've worked alongside for the past 3 decades, particularly Indigenous people from Turtle Island who've survived and continue to resist the political violence of colonization, genocide, and assimilation. So I just want to talk a bit about necessary assumptions, making sense, and seeking safety. Witnessing resistance requires us to create relationships of respect and dignity across differences of privilege. It's the task of therapists to build a bridge across the differences of power to meet persons where they are at. From this dignifying relationship, we can invite persons to take responsibility where they have actual life choices and access to power available to them, but not for the debilitating, oppressive, violence, and marginalization they've experienced, nor for the social context that promotes and sustains their suffering. We collaborate with persons and assist them in making any change they prefer to make to alter their relationship with suffering. As therapists enacting justice doing, we're further required to use our specific social locations and access to power to change the social context in which suffering and structural violence occurs. There are 2 necessary assumptions for witnessing resistance that I'm unable to work without. The first one is persons' behaviors make sense, and 2, persons are trying to be safe. These assumptions invite me to resist diagnosing people's behavior and responses as symptoms of trauma, and to resist seeing persons as being unsafe and not trustworthy with their own lives. So in conclusion, the psychological language of trauma obscures people's acts of resistance, often reinterpreting resistance to criteria of mental illness. The language of trauma obscures violence and resistance to oppression by pathologizing people, which blames them for their own suffering and limited life choices. Justice doing and a stance for decolonization help us address suffering that is inextricably linked to structural oppression and resist pathologizing and individualizing people's responses to oppression. Witnessing as enacted in social justice movements creates a space for resistance to be revealed and requires that practitioners are responsible to work towards social change. When we create relationships of respect and dignity, we truly meet people where they're at, and their acts of resistance become visible, inviting a witnessing of their intelligence, strength, and courage. We don't diagnose people as mentally ill, and we don't accuse them of being self-sabotaging, but we enter their world where their actions towards dignity and safety make sense. So that's enough for me. That's what I wanted to read to you.
That's really a that's a very powerful piece, but also so was your introduction into that piece of writing. The message, the many messages there are so important. The mental health industry just loves to exist for itself in some ways, and workers within it are striving so hard. Those with that kind of social justice agenda and a wider systemic or community-based take and critique of top-down power, really trying to understand um, how words are used to further imprison people and blame people. And there are different kinds of incarceration in play. Thank you very much for drawing attention to that and also for situating yourself in a geographic, historical context still being played out. And, in the UK, we don't do that so much because our acts of colonization have been very outward facing and drawing people inwards in order to bring people from the colonies, as we would have called them, to the country that is called, let's say, countries of the British Isles, and then to threaten those same people with being sent back. Sent back. We're in a very difficult, dangerous times. So thank you for bringing your context to us, both professionally and personally and community-wise. Um, I'm going to invite um, Shilla and Shilla Rashid and Leah Salter and I'm going to take the spotlight off you for a moment, Vikki, so that we can just give some time to the two of you, Leah and Shilla, to have your conversation about Vikki's writings, Vikki's work, and so on. Over to you. And do introduce yourselves briefly.
Thanks, Gail.
What to say after that? um,
Yeah, I was thinking similarly. I was thinking it's difficult to like find your own voice when so much has been expressed so powerfully um, and so carefully.
there was, I think, didn't want to go into introducing myself because it sort of seemed to be so kind of out of sync in some ways, with the amount of kind of emotions and sort of the movement in what Vikki was saying and sharing with us. It felt very, very moving. And I think Gail was talking about how there's something about what Vikki offers to us which takes us from a kind of position of paralysis. And I found that incredibly moving. I think I all can feel all sort of bits of me, who have really kind of stirred up in all sorts of ways. I don't. I was thinking whether it might be an idea just to give a little bit of reflection on what we've heard before we go into some of our sort of connections with her writing. And I had a very powerful one about what Vikki was saying, I guess, about sort of that violence of colonization and genocide. And she also mentions the word assimilation on page 180. And it took me back in time to when I was a child. I just come from Bangladesh in the 1970s with my mother and my four siblings to this country. And we were at school and trying to learn the English language. And it was very, in those days, there was a lot about assimilation and integration and sort of really taking people out of the cultures that they had come from and the countries that they had come from and be as English as you possibly could. And one of the ways that was happening in school was to tell anyone who'd come from a different country not to speak their language. And so my mother actually got called up at school and was told that if she wanted us to learn the English language and really develop and do well at school, she would have to stop speaking in Bengali with us at home. And that was very powerful because, of course, my mum, part of her did want to help us as her children, but she also wanted to be compliant. She'd come from a family of teachers. She was a teacher herself, and so she wanted to do the right thing, by teachers as well, and what they're intending. And so the part of her was sort of compliant. But having come from a country which had just recently sort of been in a civil war in 1971, to reclaim its language, there was also a bit of her that was very much taking an act of resistance. And so although we spoke English, at home, she tried to help us. During the weekends, she would put on the records, Bengali music, and we would sing along with the music. And, that would be a way for her to also stay in connection with her language and her culture, as well as give it to us. And I was just sort of thinking about the violence of integration and assimilation and what it does to people and to cultures and to communities. So that really sort of resonated for me. What about for you, Leah?
Well, as you were talking, Sheila, I was thinking that the idea of kind of being as English as you possibly could really struck a chord with me. And I'm thinking as a Welsh person, as a Welsh woman, I guess, and I suppose I want to lovingly push back at Gail's idea that colonization was all outward looking. And I think not in my lifetime, but certainly my family would have experienced a very similar narrative, I guess, that is to be as English as you can. And the Education Act in Wales really made that a legal imperative for people to not learn Welsh and to speak English. And I was thinking how locally to me, and I was just thinking like how Vikki's work is so clever at telling local stories that have kind of global connections. And so much of Vikki's work makes me kind of think of my own context, think of other people's context, as well as, holding in mind the context from which she's speaking out of. So, yeah, those were the sort of connections that I was making. Some of the stories in Vikki's work, they have that kind of sense of specificity, which I really struggle to say. I can say llan fai o cwsgwyn gysgo gerech yn drop o Chantilly go. But I really struggle to say specificity. But Vikki's work, does that and has this kind of sense of, just connecting people from all over the world. And I think it's really telling that there are people from all over the world, connecting this evening or whatever time frame other people are in, because there is that element. And I was really struck when Vikki was talking about the idea of the economy of language, and how that connected for Vikki between the kind of worlds of like activism and poetry and therapy. That just that sense of being economic with words, and maybe more leaning more towards action and presence, and turning up and being there. And I just think there's such a lesson in that. Even as I'm talking too much now, I'm thinking what a lesson that is for us, for those of us who do work in those in the field of therapy or connecting worlds to think about, what words am I using for what meaning, for what purpose, how are they landing, what am I communicating as I'm speaking, and just being, as careful with every word as Vikki is in her book. That is such a lesson.
Yes, I really love the way you were weaving something quite personal into then thinking about sort of a much more wider impact. And I agree with you. That is, I think, one of Vikki's gifts, that she takes, like she was saying, something about the pains of others, and sort of follows it. And having done had this kind of pleasure of and privilege of interviewing her, I really got a sense of that, like right from the time when she was very young. Her family were also like that they also were allies of people who were not like them, but they went with the pain, they went with the struggle. And I think that one of the things that I really loved about the title, To Be of Use, I think it's something that we don't think about so much in terms of therapy, or in terms of sort of, our way of being in the world, that we are, that we can be of use, and that is a very, a very important kind of place of action to be. And there's something very beautiful about what I think Vikki does, where she changes sort of nouns to doing words. That there's something like, justice doing, and
Yeah.
and so that it is about action. It is about sort of
Yeah.
an ethics of participation. It is a sort of a movement. It's not about being still. It is about this idea that you do something, you have to, have some purpose, and you have to go into action, that we're not just reflecting, because sometimes I think therapy can feel like that, can't it? That we're kind of doing the talking, but what about then, going into action? So I really love the title as well. I think it's something that we don't kind of think about so much, and the idea of being in service to others.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And there's something about how Vikki talks about hope, that speaks to what you're talking about there, Sheila. Because when I when other people talk about hope, or when I read things about hope, sometimes I feel a little bit like disconnected from it, or I feel a little bit like people are talking it in a theoretical kind of way. But there's something about how Vikki talks about hope that really makes me feel hopeful. It really makes me kind of with healthy skepticism kind of built in, but just makes me feel like that things are possible, and that things are possible through action, and through kind of meaningful relating with one another. And I think that's one of the key threads through the book, is this idea of staying alive in the work, living, breathing hope, and being part of justice doing in the world. It's like an invitation for others to kind of to get on the same bus. And I think that is just, it's really, Vikki's work is so generous. It's so invitational, that I think it just, it kind of welcomes you in and on board, and sort of instills in you a sense of hope that you can be a part of it and you can make a difference.
It's that sort of theme of hope is a really interesting one. Again, because it's sometimes, what you were saying about the sort of trying to get a hold of it. It can seem like it's a really nice kind of idea, and it's a really important thing to try and kind of think about, give voice to, and kind of elicit, when we're either in therapy or in other kind of communities. But I think what alongside that, I think she does something else, which is that she's actually talking about some really uncomfortable kind of states of being and sort of living, and the kind of people that she works with, the communities that she works with, these are not sort of hopeful places. They're not sort of, and they're really difficult. And I was thinking about the 20 men who are on death row, and how do you kind of work in that kind of a situation where it feels like there isn't any hope? You just know that there's a way that you're going to go, and how do you then think about something that's much more hopeful in there, or that it gives you agency? So I also think that she has this kind of ability to weave things that seem to be really sort of things that we should be doing, like hope, like justice, and being ethical, but then actually moves it into something that is quite an interrogation, and is a challenge, and it's disruptive, and it's not easy.
Yeah. I'm wondering, should we move to read an aspect of? I know we've both chosen different pieces, and we don't know what each other have chosen. So it is entirely possible that we've chosen the same excerpt, but it's unlikely. But the idea being that we wanted to kind of stay spontaneous in our responses to each other. So I'd like to read. This is a piece from the chapter called "Leaning In" as Imperfect Allies, and it's like a story from Vikki's life. That I think, just for me, this story stays in my mind just really clearly. I get on the 20 bus late at night, and like most women, I can tell you exactly how many drunk men are on the bus. But there is one guy that requires all of my attention because he's loud. He's standing up and he's shouting racist things at an elder Chinese woman. I stand still, not moving, looking and listening. I think, what am I going to do? The first thing I think about is, I can't take on a great big drunk man. I've tried this in my life. It hasn't worked for me. And I'm scared of great big drunk men. I'm not required as an ally to take on that guy unless I have the power to do it. I am required to be an ally to this woman. I look at the Chinese elder woman and I kind of throw my love at her. I want her to know I'm here, I'm with her. I'm going to try to figure out what I'm going to do. She's got her head down. She's got her groceries on a seat next to her and she's tucked in tight. She's not looking at my love that I'm throwing at her. That is a good tactic, but it's not working. Well, I'm trying to figure out how the heck I'm going to respond. A young, sweet, lovely person who I cannot tell the gender of slips by me, Aikido style, and picks up the grocery, puts them on her lap and sits next to her. What I saw as a full seat, this person saw as a seat without a person in it. Beautiful. What a beautiful thing. So now there's a body between this elder Chinese woman and this man who is attacking her with racism. The Chinese woman doesn't thank this person. I can tell this person is looking to say, should I put my arm around you? Shall I talk to you? And the Chinese woman is letting them know she's not engaging with them either. There's a whole bunch of us on the bus that are thinking, okay, what's the next thing we should do? This guy is still going. Now I'm rooting for this young person and I'm worried for them. My read is that they are possibly trans or gender variant, and maybe they are queer, so they could be the next to be attacked. Why should they be in front of this big angry guy? This is not good. There's a really large First Nations guy on the bus. I can't tell whether or not he's had a few beers or if he's doing performance art, because he's by the window and he slips by the person on the aisle seat, puts his hand on the bar and swings around, takes all the room on the bus. In my head, I'm thinking, oh man, big guy stuff. There's big guy and big guy. This is going to be bad. But no, I totally misjudged this guy. He's been an uncountable man. What he's saying is, bring it on, bring it over here. Hey man, he says, the First Nations guy to the white guy. Hey man, you were the original boat person. He's responding to the white guy. telling the Chinese woman to get back on the boat, to go back to China. Hey man, you were the original boat person. Christopher Columbus was your captain. Get back on your own damn boat. And he's laughing as he says this. Everyone on the bus exhales because we know we are going to be okay, okay enough. And then everybody leans in, and the guy looks at me, and though I do seem inept, I am available to be an ally. He looks at me, and with a smile he asks, "What the hell boat did you come from?" I timidly say, "Ireland, Newfoundland, and a little bit of England." He says, "You can stay, you know your boats." I'd love to read the whole rest of this because it ends with a bunch of women getting off the bus early and kind of trying to be of use to the Chinese woman who takes herself off. And then there's this group of women stood at the bus stop and have to wait for another bus to come. But what I love, apart from the just absolute beauty of this story, the things I love about this are the fact that in Vikki's writing, what she does is kind of put her imperfections out there. You know, tell us stories about things where, you know, this is not a how to address these kinds of situations on a bus kind of story. This is a story about how Vikki tried to be an ally, and how that story has stayed with her, and how she's reflected upon it, and how it's enabled her to go on in her imperfect allyship. The other thing I love about this story and about the way it's written in the book, the footnotes, the amount of care that Vikki puts into the footnotes of this story says so much. So, and again, I won't read it all now because of time, but if you get a chance to, well, I'm sure you all will read this story. On pages 3 and 4, the footnotes are just written with such care about the language that Vikki is using throughout this chapter, and really unpacking the language she has chosen, why she has chosen it, who she's checked it out with, how she's accountable for the language that she uses, how language changes over time, etc. And I think it's just a really good example of how we can all, as well as being of use, just be as careful as we possibly can be in these kinds of lived experiences, and then in our writing about these experiences, as we're explaining them, as we're telling other people about them, to have that same level of care and duty.
Beautiful, thank you. That sort of really made me think about how messy and imperfect and kind of sometimes what struggle it is, you know, within ourselves to really think about what's the thing to do here. You know, that question that she puts to herself, like, what can I do here? What am I expected to do here? And what's possible for me? What are my limitations? You know, and I might want to do something. I think she said something earlier on about how actions can sometimes move from her intentions, you know, from our intentions that we want to and we intend to, you know, to kind of be allies, or we want to be able to call out injustices or racism, or, you know, or even something like genocide. I mean, look how long it's taken for us in this country and for the media to go from calling what's happening in Palestine as a conflict to war to now genocide. And so I think that it's really that chapter that you read and the way that you read it as well, I think it really gave this flavor of sort of sometimes how difficult it is to be in that position of sharing other people's pain, and to take a position of kind of doing something to the context in order to change, you know, the experience of the person or the people. And so it's, yeah, it sort of really spoke to me about that.
I know we're probably tight for time now, Shelley. I'm really intrigued as to what excerpt you chose.
Um, it's really interesting because I guess I was sort of thinking about that whole kind of tension and challenge, in terms of kind of maintaining this justice doing. And it's sort of the chapter I looked at was social activism, social justice activism and therapy, tensions, points of connections, and hopeful skepticism. And really love that chapter because it also she offers us lots of questions, that we can ask ourselves, and I kind of ticked a number of them. But I think it follows really nicely from what you were talking about, which is that dilemma about what to do and how imperfect it can be sometimes. And actually the imperfections or the imperfection of that process is also really an important part of that journey. And I just wanted to read this very small bit, which is about resisting neutrality and taking overt positions for justice doing. And she says that this requires a critical resistance towards neutrality and objectivity within the helping professions. As therapists, there is a risk that we can participate in deconstructing and naming transgressions of power without taking up on the social project of transforming the societies in which we live. As Maori researcher Linda Suhiwai Smith, and I hope I may not have got it right, says in decolonizing methodologies, deconstruction is a useful practice, but it does not prevent someone from dying. And there can be all kinds of dying, I guess. There can be the physical dying and being killed. And of course, we have in this country and abroad a number of examples of where people from global majorities have been killed in racist violence. And whole communities and groups have been killed as well, or there's been erasure. But I felt that it also talked about another kind of dying, or sort of a sort of maybe some kind of a sense of feeling that when we're doing this work and we're trying to kind of really navigate this sense of what to say and come out of our positions of neutrality, it's really hard. And I was thinking about our students, the students that we train in our training institutes, and that we're also trying to help them to think about, justice doing, and to kind of call out the kind of context, the social cultural context, rather than go into that pathologization or that individual kind of blaming, and how difficult that is when people are kind of navigating that sense of what to say and what to do, and that becomes a thing that sort of paralyzes, and then can sometimes make it really difficult to move into action. And action can be just to say something as well, not necessarily kind of affecting big changes. So it sort of made me think about that. So I'll just leave it there because I'm just conscious of time, but I'm also conscious of wanting to give people a chance to kind of reflect and say what they want to.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to respond to your response, but I think we probably need to widen out.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you, Shelley. I think we're probably going to hand back to you, Gail.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Sheila, and thank you, Leah. I'm just going to remove the spotlights from you, not out of any disrespect, but purely practicality. For a lot of people, because just let me say before we move into this next part, firstly, thank you for those thoughts and heartfelt responses connecting with your work, your lives, the wider world, and Vikki's writings. Apologies, by the way, to those who've wondered why, that their links arrived late. It's a complete mystery. we sent out the links in many forms and quite early. However, because of techno problems, trying especially to avoid unwanted guests, let's put it like that, for some reason that we don't understand, you got your links late. And I see in my email there are a lot of failed deliveries of emails. Maybe the more we try to send them out from different email addresses, the more they were treated as spam. I'm not sure. But the recording of this session will be available in a link that I've posted in the chat on the Systemic Practice YouTube channel. And it's in your email as well. If you've got a link in the email, you've got a load of other links, both to the book in Kindle form and in paperback form. And you also will have got a link to the Systemic Practice YouTube channel. And that's where you'll find the full recording of this if you want to listen to it again, watch it again, and so on. Because we started a bit late, I don't know if people have time to go on an extra 15 minutes if we needed to, wanted to, because it's 7:45. Maybe we'll be done by 8 o'clock. But so somebody's putting their thumbs up, and Vicky, you're the most important person. You might have to run off and get a bus or something. Is that all right? Okay. So for those who need to leave in 1/4 of an hour, at whatever time it is where you are, understood, and thank you. And you can say your goodbye in the chat. For those of you who want to stay on an extra 1/4 of an hour, that would be lovely, if you're able to, so that we have a bit of less rushed time now. So let's just open it to Liz. You've been monitoring the chat, and I'm feeling that the group's kind of just about small enough. It's 57 people. That's tiny, really. Um, that people could, if they wanted to, ask their own question or make their own response in some way and mute themselves. How would that be? Or Liz, do you want to kick us off by pointing to something? I don't know. Where are you, Liz? There you are.
Yeah, I can point us to something. Nobody's used the red emoji system, so I'm not sure how anybody would feel about being invited to. And Vicky's been like responding as well in the chat as well, so it's all interactive already. I suppose there are a couple. I mean, this one relates, like goes straight from Chilla's point about teaching trainees and working in mainstream. And Kathleen's mentioned it's maybe think about how to apply ideas when working in mainstream settings. I don't know if you've got anything in response, Vicky.
Kathleen, do you want to actually put the question to Vicky? Would you like to just unmute yourself and put your camera on? But don't worry if you can't. Are you there? Yeah, Kathleen.
I'm here.
Yeah, welcome.
Like I'll put it into a question.
Yeah.
So I guess I have worked for the voluntary sector before and also for a human rights organization, but I currently work within a local authority, children's services, and I have worked for the NHS before. And I think I have found the ideas that you talk about much easier to apply when I'm not in the mainstream. It's a lot harder when I'm part of that mainstream to be able to kind of find a position that will do something different within that mainstream. So I guess that's just...
Kathleen, this is like a really common struggle folks have, right? Within the structures. When I guess the first thing I would start with is solidarity. Who is in solidarity with you behind enemy lines there? Are you alone? Like, don't be alone. You know, who, like I said, there's always more solidarity to know than you know of. And I think as activists, we're always looking like, here's the reality where I am. Where can I make movement? Where can I put a foot down? Who's listening to me? What can I leverage? Right. But I also think One of the things I think I say in every supervisory conversation I have is we have to hold power and responsibility in attention. So you can only be responsible to deliver that which you have the power to deliver. And that's when we start to get when we start to lose track of sustainability, when we start to hold ourselves to an account for something that we have absolutely no access to power to do. So what I'm asking us to do as practitioners is to try to be 100% accountable for all the power we have available to us and all of the solidarity that we can create and no more. So you can't be personally responsible for that frame, but there are spaces within that. Where are the, like as Lacey, where are the spaces of justice doing? I just think of all of what you're doing as acts of resistance and never being silent and acquiesce. And I will say something else here, even though it's being recorded. There are folks who are also behind these kind of lines of power who some of their act of resistance is they give the powers that be everything they want, and then they do extremely liberatory justice doing work with people, but, and that's an act of resistance in itself. There are many ways to resist this and to try to do justice with people. Don't hold yourself to the project of delivering justice to people within systems that are part of necropolitics, and Mbembe's ideas of policies that actually kill people. You're not responsible for dismantling necropolitics. You are responsible to be in solidarity with others and to try to shift everything you have any access of power to in terms of a liberatory movement. I don't know if that's helpful for you, Kathleen.
Absolutely. And yeah, because it's that, otherwise it's that burning out, isn't it? You have to make sure you know where you can make a difference, but then also make a difference when it's possible.
Exactly. And holding it in attention,
Yeah.
holding power and response. And then I guess the other thing I would add to that too is in dialogue with you, you have me thinking, I also think about discerning power from influence. I've been in a lot of systems where I have no power. I have shit tons of influence. I get listened to now. I have a PhD. I'm white. And I've published some stuff. So when I say some stuff, even though I don't have structural power to make change, I do have influence. So look for, where you also have and discern power from influence. And you have to, like when I'm talking about holding yourself accountable, and us doing collective accountability, holding ourselves collectively accountable, it's not enough to say I have no power in this situation. You actually have all kinds of influence. People respect you. People. Leverage that too. It's a diversity of, like we say in anarchism, right? Diversity of tactics. Like it's a diversity of tactics. Thinking about it tactitionally. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have Kathy Richardson would like to ask a question.
Hi.
Hi, Kathy Richardson. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here. I just wanted to share a few reflections and ask a question. So I just wanted to say that I'll talk to everybody. Vikki's work has become like my favorite bedtime story. You've heard this story and you want someone to tell it to you over and over again. And I just carry this work around with me. It's in my heart. It's on my shoulders. It's like I've got Vikki with me, and I just refer to it all the time because it gives like a grounding kind of framework that I can live in, and I really try to share that with my students. And I feel like it's like you're part of me, Vikki, because I'm using your work so much. And what I also started studying like shamanic journeying, and I wanted to tell you that the peopling the room activity is completely shamanic, like traveling in your imagination and spirit to another place, whether it's a courtroom, an operating room, or whatever, and transforming that before you get there, cleaning it, smudging it, loving it, bringing all your ancestors in. And so I thought I think Vikki would like to know that this shamanic process. So I guess what I'll ask you now is, like every day something new happens in the world. I mean, there's tons of beautiful things that are happening all the time, and then there's new horrors every day too. So how do you like sort of in this is weird language, but like integrate it into, okay, this is me today. This is my understanding of the world and what I need to respond to. And I know you've got your people around you, but it's a lot to hold. So, like, when do you pee it out or whatever? Keep this
Well,
sense
first of all, I just want to really thank Kathy is a Métis prof, and we've written articles together too. We've co-authored stuff, and you're one of the people, I think, with Alan Wade, where sometimes it's really hard for people to tease out what's us, what's you, what's me. And I think I wrote it in the book too, on one article is, if people can't tell the difference between our work, I'm kind of complimented I'm okay with that. But I think like in this present moment, I think about Howard Zinn, Jewish union activist, anti-Zionist guy. He like caused all kinds of crap in his community for his own family. Like was just, university professor at an American school and never got kicked out. Just wild activism his whole life, a real testament to that. But he talks about how there are always times where people are going to behave magnificently, and that we cannot wait for utopia. We can't wait to overthrow the state. We can work for these kind of changes, transformational changes, but it is our task in that the future is made up of many presents. And if in this present we are treating each other as we believe human beings should be with each other, that is a marvelous victory. And so I always start where I stand, Kathy, right? I'm just trying to, so for me, I'm responding primarily to the necropolitics, like the death politics of the drug poisoning catastrophe in Canada, where 50,000 people have died of a totally preventable thing, right? And so no matter what else is happening in my province, 7 people died yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So that's like, and I talk about enraged grief and mourning amidst atrocity. But I also feel like I really look to see that believed in hope that Leah talked about. It's a doing, I'm looking for things that are actually hope in action. That is what I'm looking for. And I see it, Kathy, I do see it, because as Howard Zinn says, people behave magnificently. Like a lovely friend of mine, Michael Boucher, he's in the acknowledgements too, he's in Rochester, sent me a video of ICE was trying to grab a bunch of roofers and, disappear them, political disappearance of them in the middle of the day. This is in the United States. And a black pastor was walking by and found out about it, called all her people, and like 30 people showed up, surrounded those men, refused to let ICE take them, and ICE ended up running away in their van and trying to escape, right? This is magnificent and beautiful. This happened yesterday too. Like other things happened, right? And death in Gaza continues to happen. Other things are happening, but this is happening also. So it's about holding these things in attention, believed in hope that moves us to action. And I'm really cautious of the like ableist language of being paralyzed, but being stuck, like we need to be moved to action, and aware enough, but I also think about movement work, right, Kathy, that there are times we have to step back and exhale and be in our body to be able to be okay again. And like, how do we permission each other in solidarity with love? So I don't know if I've answered your question, Kathy.
That's a great answer right there. And I just wanted to say, my mom passed away recently and I've been writing about her, but my next blog is going to be like, she taught me, like, we shouldn't kill people.
Yeah.
Like it's revolutionary. And so many moms probably told their kids it's one of the golden rules. And right now it's just so like needed, this kind of mother knowledge, right?
Yeah, and that's what Gail Simon said to me when we were having a little talk yesterday, right? She was like, we were both so excited. People were interested in coming. And one of the things Gail said, like, we just need this right now. We need a bit of joy. We need to celebrate something. And I think about people's energy and taking their time I'm so humbled by everybody joining, but I know it's not about me. It's about a collectivity, and it's about a possibility that this is also part of what's going on in this world today. There's moments where we gather, in this mutual aid, that is solidarity, that is love. Yeah. Love you, Kathy. I'm so glad you showed up.
Oh.
Yeah.
lots of links to Kathy's work going on in the chat as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I wondered if Cameron wanted to speak. Oh, sorry, Carmen. I mispronounced
Carmen.
Sorry, Carmen.
I actually have to, I was just about to type in a message to apologize that I have to run. So maybe I will use this little opportunity to say thank you to everyone for arranging such a marvelous gathering and just the being togetherness, how it continue to reduce us and the ways that all of this and all of this work helps to make sense of things in times where very few things do. That sense of solidarity and how you exist and live in our minds and in our hearts and in our consciousnesses is so valuable. There are so many of us going, what would Vikki do in this situation? It's so fucking helpful. You have no idea. Thank you, everyone. Take
Thank you,
care.
Carmen. Always appreciate your wisdom, your words, your solidarity.
Stop it.
No, I mean it.
Bye.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Thank you. And Finn is in responding to Schiller. I don't know if Finn would like to add to a response. He might not be still here.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just open it up to people.
Yeah.
Say who wants to take up space and say something, join in.
Hugh did have a question. I think Hugh's still here.
Yeah, I'm still here. Been busy guarding the doorway. I'm kind of curious. You talked about sort of almost like the way that we think. It's kind of like a mental illness. The way that sort of that capitalist mindset is a mental illness. So it's kind of interesting. It's like, oh my goodness, these poor billionaires, they're sick. And I'm not saying that that we should donate the money, but what it's a really interesting kind of reframe for me is thinking, the medicine is relationship. The medicine is relational rather than individualism.
Yeah.
It's about connection. So it's because I guess I was sort of thinking along those lines really of you used the word mental illness, and that kind of stuck with me because
Yeah.
we've been sort of moving away from thinking about mental illness and diagnoses as really unhelpful, but kind of thinking about sort of a dualistic kind of way of thinking is a kind of pathology.
Yeah.
I don't know. Somebody once said something about that, but you're bringing these ideas alive.
Oh, thanks for that. Hugh, if it's okay, I'm just going to read something I wrote for young activists in a zine. That's actually in the book. It's called "The Problem's Not Depression, It's Oppression," which is what I think you're singing to. I believe that what gets understood as mental illness is directed more by pharmaceutical corporations, capitalism, colonization, transphobia, sexism, and racism than by real concerns for human suffering. I think it's way more accurate to think about people who struggle against exploitation and domination as being oppressed, not depressed. People need justice, not just medication. The problem's not in our mind, our brains, or our neurons, but in the world where privileged people abuse power and destroy lives, Mother Earth, and the communities for greed. Being an activist, acknowledging the suffering of others, unmasking your own privilege, holding a critical analysis of points of your own oppression and power, all these things can lead to the stuff that looks like depression. We can start to think we might be crazy, depressed, angry, obsessive, defiant, maladapted. Hopelessness can make us think we can't do anything about injustice. Political awareness can be overwhelming and spiritually painful. Individualism makes us think we're alone and no one thinks like us. Our resistance to this political violence, degradation, heartbreak, and terror is to hold each other in sacred and revolutionary love, to work for justice. That's what solidarity is. Solidarity is belonging. You just need to figure out the best use of you, trust you're going to find your people, and work in solidarity with others. In direct actions like the homelessness march, I experienced the social divine. Belonging with others who struggle and thirst for justice is my solidarity, my spirituality. Activism is my sanity-making project, my resistance against depression. Activism is not a sign of mental illness, but mental wellness. Survivors of torture have taught me a spirited political protest is worth 100 therapy sessions. Happiness is overrated. Social justice is underrated. We're not crazy. Another world is possible. I'm not immature or crazy because I'm 60, don't own a house, a TV, or a car. It's not that I'm idealistic, foolish, or stupid. I mean, I have a PhD, a life partner, and I share a dog. It's that I don't want to participate in consumerism with all of my life. Environmental destruction is suicidal. Greed is crazy. And I believe that willfully exploiting the lives of other human beings around the planet is a sign of mental illness. Don't let anybody tell you because you're heartbroken about the indignities and suffering of most of the world's people, you're crazy and you should go shopping and be happy. No justice, no peace of mind. A socially just world is a mentally well world. Actions for justice are acts of sanity.
Wow. Thank you. Wow, what wonderful words.
It's a rant. It's kind of a love rant for young activists.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Hugh. You just called that to mind. I hope that was a good enough response.
Oh, I think it was messy and beautiful.
You had somebody, a 12-year-old, listening in the chat. So somebody was saying that their daughter was listening. So
Lynn wanted to say something. She wanted to ask a question. I could see in the chat.
yeah, Caitlin would like to ask a question. Yeah, I think is that what you said?
Yeah, hi. I've just loved listening to everyone, and I won't take up more time by echoing what everyone's saying, just how important it feels to be here. And I'm thinking about an opportunity I've got to use some influence to hopefully do something important, but it's very much in the NHS in a structured, institutionalized way. And I don't know if there's solidarity in the room, or I know there's some, but I don't know how much there is. And I'm just thinking about the concept of being different, but not too different. When you're meeting people who you want to change their minds, how do you stay with grounded within your own language practices and your own justice doing, even just in a linguistic way in a conversation, while also meeting people where they are and creating some hopefully movement? Because I'm just so aware of how I could be experienced by someone who would see me as all those words that lefties get called. So I wondered if you could say something about that.
Thanks for that, Caitlin. I've got a lot of thoughts about this. Well, the first one is the thing I'm most afraid of being seen as is righteous, because I think righteousness is the end of collaboration and respect and dignity of others. So they're not going to meet you in the struggle if you're meeting them with righteousness. That said, there are things I don't debate with fascists. I'm not debating if there's a genocide in Palestine. I'm not debating whether trans people are human. I don't get into those debates. So we're talking about where there's possibility of a dialogical space. So that's what I wrote about, I think, in that Leaning In article, is looking for the ethics of the other. My partner will tell you this is my superhero power. I hope that doesn't sound too arrogant. But I actually believe human beings want to be ethical. There's nobody who would come invite me to talk or have me around who doesn't want this. So I ask people what's in their heart, what are their values, what are their ethics? And then this is from Janella Bird, and then I hold them to it. So you say you're about dignity, so I don't get why we're, cutting these homeless people off or blacklisting them from services because they use the C word or threw yogurt at somebody. You're telling me you're about dignity. What we're doing is not dignified. So lean in, you have to look for the ethics of the other. And I'm an abolitionist. I mean, Angela Davis abolition, no police, no human beings in cages, no surveillance. I am an abolitionist. But when I started my work in the health authority in the downtown east side, I knew it was up to me, in order to be accountable to clients and the community, to create respectful, dignified relationships with some police officers because they're going to be called every day to the clinic. So whenever I found a police officer who was treating someone with dignity, I wrote letters for them. I got their name and I called them, when I had to do things. Like I'm looking for the ethics of the other, and then I'm leaning into that. And then I'm also inviting so you're telling me you're about these ethics. One thing you can always use, Caitlin, is read the goddamn mandate. It never says we're going to be dicks, we're going to withhold resources, and we're going to make people suffer. It never says that, and yet enacting it often does that. So let's just remind our mandate. So it says respect. So this is disrespectful. I don't know. It's a leaning in kind of thing, I think, but it's relational. So that you don't know how much solidarity you have in that room, Caitlin. That is your actual work to do. Change happens relationally. No people are change agents. Change is social, right? And so do some relational work to say out loud who is going to be with you on these pieces, right? And they don't have to agree with you about all the actions. As America Bracco says, we don't want to annihilate our important differences, but we want to create points of connection and solidarity on our ethics. Then we can disagree about how to enact them. But I can't be in a conversation with somebody who's against respect or dignity. And no one's going to say that. Oh, Caitlin, I don't know, dignity's a bit far for me. I'm not so sure. No one's going to say that. So then help them walk it. Because a lot of times people don't have a clue how to put these ethics in practice. And you do. That's what you've got to bring. I don't know what you're thinking of what I'm saying.
No, I'm thinking we've got at the bottom of all our emails, we've got all our values. It comes up automatically. So I think I'm going to lead with that. That's beautiful.
And also, like what everybody has said, so many people here have spoken about poetry and the power of individual words. Okay, if you've got the word dignity there, what do we mean by dignity? Because every team I go into tells me they're client-centered. Most teams I go into are actually staff-centered, right? So I'm asking people, show me how in ethics are revealed in practice, not in the way you talk about them. So tell me about what are your practices that actually center clients? And people they got nothing to say about that. Walk it.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm aware of time going on.
Yeah.
And feeling, was there anybody who had anything really burning that they'll be upset that they never flagged, said, join in? If so, unmute yourself. And yeah. Okay. Vikki, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for so many things. And the words are not going to be adequate, but they are heartfelt. And it is to thank you for trusting Leah and me with the assembling of your papers. Gosh, that was a privilege and an honor to immerse ourselves in your work, in your journeys, in the collaborations and the communities. It was really humbling to read the stories with others that you'd been, in the sense making, the change making. But really you offer something that is needed now. And I'm sorry if this embarrasses you in any way. But we need works by you and others. I mean, it's wonderful hearing you, Kathy Richardson, speak as well, because your works are also part of, I don't know what's going on over in Canada with a small c, but I mean, something's going on there. That there's such a wonderful collective of people who are putting out inspirational text. I mean, it's not that funny because it's against something. It's with something, it's with the wind and with the spirits and the powers, but it's also in the face of um, uh, strategic structural hostilities and how to live, how to survive. And I see you as part of that community, that wider community, Vikki. So I think it's important to acknowledge what you and Kathy were talking about, the mutual influences, the growing of each other's ideas with each other's ideas, that there's something both unique and shared in what's being produced. So thank you very much for Leah's and my opportunity, and for sharing all your work, because writing is hard work. As some of us here know, there's a lot of writers here present, and there's probably a lot of would-be writers here present as well. And of course, as editor of Murmurations with several other editors and reviewers here of Murmurations, you know what I'm going to say next. Everybody's a writer. If you've got something going on, whether you put pencil to paper, finger to keyboard, or you get out your phone and use that text to speech to text thing, you've got something to say in whatever format. And Vikki, you were a really good storyteller. But also, what's most important is people can still tell stories, and the history of various professions is to tell stories from an aboutness position, which renders all the stories unethical because they are told about others from without and end up othering the others with lots of misconceptions and untruths, and rendering then those people in a lower, less than, often dehumanized position. And somehow I think it's very important to look to your work to see how you've managed these things to avoid that. That's a big challenge for all of us, to mind our positioning and in our writing and in our everyday life. So thank you for today. Thank you for all you do in the world. Thank you for the inspiration for us to recognize what we do and can do in our everyday lives, however that emerges. And the book, read it, buy it, write your own as well, people, because we're also your readers and we need each other. Thank you to Hugh for gatekeeping. Thank you to Liz for keeping an eye on the chat. Thank you to Leah and Schiller for your reflections, and to everybody who's participated this evening. Apologies again for the link problems. Got nothing more to say on that mystery. And be in touch if you want to be. But Vikki, thank you. Take good care of yourself and those close to you. And we look forward to more, if you feel like it. And to meeting up in person.
We'll see you on that side of the water. Thanks, everybody.
And there's the workshop, and people can look into the workshop in November to get more into these ideas as well. Yeah, there's a workshop November 11th, a time in the UK and a time for Canada and Australia. So that'd be great if people wanted to go to that. There's links on my website for that. I just want to thank everybody for showing up. I so appreciate you taking the time. I'm very humbled. I'm very humbled. And it's been a joy fest. Really appreciate this. Yeah.
Good to get together, isn't it?
Yeah.
We need that. Take care, everybody, wherever you are.
Bye now.
Thank you, Vikki. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.